Hey folks, Michael Mann from Michael Mann Security Services. Welcome to 2008 Mumbai attack, a case study in surveillance detection. Very quickly, as always, how you get a hold of us, you can get our website, michaelmannsecurityservices.com. You can call Scott at 615-606-1006. You can reach Scott at scottm, S-C-O-T-T-M, at michaelmannsecurityservices.com, or you can get me at contact at michaelmannsecurityservices.com, or you can get us on Facebook and Instagram at Safe with Man. Okay, a lot of folks tune into this one as in last week. We appreciate that. So as folks start to get into Facebook, some folks have a little bit of trouble with that in the beginning because some of us don't have it, or some of you guys don't have it. So let me go over just announcements really quick and thank yous as everybody's starting to jump on. Training real quick. So we want to thank River of Life Church, Jacksonville, North Carolina, large church in Jacksonville there, home of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, my home. Well, I wasn't there very long. I was deployed most of the time, but I was there for about 45 days, long time ago. So I want to thank them. They went through Israeli security concept or behavior threat detection training module 1 last month. And then this past Sunday, they finished module 2. Trent, who is a team leader, thank you so much for putting your entire team through that for us. And we hope you got something out of it. Sounds like we did from the feedback. And again, I can't thank you enough. I hope you're using that Surefire that we sent you, by the way. If you're not, we're going to be mad at you, okay? CPS Module 2, we had churches here in Tennessee, North Carolina, and Nigeria. Finished CPS Module 1 last month. They're going into CPS, or Church Protection Specialist Module 2 this month, and then they'll be moving to Module 3 next month. So thank you, folks. I'm assuming our friend from Nigeria is on today, so we hope that you're here somewhere, both of them. And then this weekend, we have Parish Presbyterian Church in Franklin. They want to go through all 3 modules at once. So unfortunately for them, they're going to spend all weekend with me. So they're bringing their entire team through. So I look forward to seeing you guys on Friday. Perry, hopefully you're on here. And I can't wait to see you and your team on Friday evening at Fellowship Bible Church. All right. Upcoming events really quick. Virtual instructor-led training, the Intro to Vehicle Defense. We've already got some professional protectors that jumped on this. Looks like some folks from Protective Details from mayors and governors. This will be, again, a Zoom platform where we talk about an introduction to when you've either trying to protect yourself in the car or protect that third party, what that looks like, equipment that's needed, trying to fight from the vehicle, legal recommendations, quick snapshot threat assessments when things happen. So we're going to get into that very quickly, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. on August 11th. We hope to see you there. Please register on the website. Church Protection Specialist Module 1 Security Operations, that's going to be Sunday, August 16th, 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Again, that is a virtual event. Hope to see you there. Scott's going to send out those links if you're interested after this presentation. Then we've got the Israeli Security Concept Threat Identification, Sunday, August 23rd. So this is step 1 or module 1 of 2 modules in this training session or this training platform. That's August 23rd on Sunday, 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. If it doesn't matter if you're a church security team, we designed this for those folks, but any protector can take this. If you are especially if you're a church security team member or ministry member, or if you're doing personal protection, this is the most important. These 2 modules will be there's the threat identification, and that second is actually conducting field threat assessments or FTAs. This is the most important training you can take. And it's very, very reasonable. In fact, it's downright cheap compared to where you get it from anywhere else. And so it's a good class. Look into it. Send me or Scott an email. We'll give you a description of what it is. And again, we've had some churches take it, a number of churches here, and then we just had a church in North Carolina. We've got good feedback. So most important class you can take as a protector. This is what helps you prevent the attack. All right. Just expectations. Let me say this before we get into this. This is a complicated event. I could spend 3 days doing nothing but talking about the attack at Mumbai from 2008 that happened in 2008. What's important about this, we're going to spend time talking about the attack and the surveillance that happened because, number one, I want you to see just how successful these bad guys or these adversaries were. Like they were really successful in what happened. Out of the 10 attackers we'll get into it, only 1 survived, and then I think he was executed a couple years ago in India for what he did. But this was a successful attack. And these folks had never stepped foot into India until the day of the attack. So the success came from a hostile surveillant for 2 years, conducting hostile surveillance, so conducting that surveillance and what that looked like. And so, number one, successful attack, and number two, what makes them successful. It's not the guns, it's not how tough the bad guys are, it's the information that they received. And here, they received that information from someone else over a period of 2 years, and that surveillance, like all surveillance, was very overt. Okay, so we're going to spend about 30 to 35 minutes on this. Again, we could spend 3 days going to roll through this thing. If you have any questions, again, at the end, as always, you can ask us. Again, 35 minutes. At the end of this, we're going to have a Q&A. Our agenda, we're going to talk about the attack and overview. You folks really need to understand what this looked like before it happened and as it was occurring, and then the what brought this to an end and why it took so long. We're going to talk about the targets in general, what they look like. There were 5 primary targets and 4 or 5 secondary targets, or kind of targets of opportunity. We'll talk about those. We're going to talk about the terrorist organization Lashkar-e-Taiba, or LET, where they came from, their background, so you understand what that looks like. I'll get into the adversaries, their backgrounds, because these were not, these are folks that were very modestly raised, and they came from a very modest location in the world. And so I want you to understand these were people that had not been training for years. They were not senior in their attack capabilities. They were trained by LET for a certain amount of months, and they conducted this attack on land that they had never been or visited before. We'll get into the tactics, what that looked like, what they were carrying, what kind of assaults that they actually conducted. And then we'll get into the surveillance detection piece and talk about what that looked like, and then kind of give you a quick strategy on surveillance detection, what a surveillance detection platform would look like for you. All right, so considerations on this. So if you've watched our other webinars, which I know there's several emails I've been monitoring the folks that are registering, so I know that you have, or a lot of you have, but if you have not, so this is the first time you've tuned into a webinar for us, go to our website, michaelmannsecurityservices.com, under resources. If you look at videos, you'll see a number of videos that talk about terrorism. We talk about the waves of terrorism, Rappaport's waves. Specifically, you folks that have had this before, remember we talked about the religious wave, we talked about the technology wave, and that we're going to get into this here because it involves both waves of terrorism. Adversary attack methodology, you guys understand what that is. If you've not, go back to some of our videos of the first time you're joining us. So that adversary attack methodology, those actions that the bad guy must take to be successful in that attack. It could start off, or it does start off, with selecting that target, gathering information, of course surveillance, which is what we're going to talk about the second part of this, and all the way to the attack, and if necessary the escape, if they're lucky enough to do that, if that's the plan. Requirements for conducting that attack. All right, if you guys don't remember this, remember the bad guy has to have information about that threat or about that target specifically, which is what we're going to talk about today. Number 2, they must have the element of surprise. Number 3, they must have control, which usually has to do with the weapons. In this case, it was weapons, IEDs, hand grenades, pistols. And then last, they must be mobile. They must be able to move around. And again, that's why this attack was so successful. They very quickly and overwhelmingly met all 4 of those requirements. And again, based off of information that was gathered for 2 years, or a little over 2 years, from someone else, and it was given to them through LET. Soft targets, identification of soft targets. Remember, the gun does not make you a hard target. Guns do not prevent violence. It's identifying that adversary activity prior to. So again, think about that as we go through this presentation. And then, of course, requirements for conducting hostile surveillance. What is surveillance? Okay. If you don't know what surveillance is, it's going to be very hard for you to set up a surveillance detection program. Surveillance being just the observation, person, place, or thing for the purpose of gathering information. When we get into hostile surveillance, it is all of that same definition, but for the purpose of conducting a successful attack. So again, if you don't know what surveillance is, it's going to be hard to know what it looks like. It's going to be hard for you to have a surveillance detection platform. Purpose of surveillance, again, think about this. We've talked about this numerous times, especially if you've been watching us here over the last couple months. The purpose, number 1, is I want to know exactly what it is I'm looking at. What do I see? And I'm doing that as the bad guy to put together that target pattern analysis. What time do you open? What time do you close? How many people are in there? What are my avenues of approach? Where's the target area inside the building that I need to get to, and how do I get to it? Number two, I want to know who's going to stop me. Where are the obstacles? All right, what does that look like? Are there good guys on site? Is it security? What does that mean? What are their capabilities? And then, of course, we're going to get into, when we start to look at those security measures or those obstacles, of course, I want to know what the site vulnerabilities are. Can I be detected? If I can be detected, what does that mean? So what do I have to do to not be detected? You're going to see the bad guy here that conducted surveillance went through this entire process. He was trained by a foreign adversary, was taught how to do that, but he went through this entire process and was very successful. All right. Okay, overview. So I want you to understand the attack. Again, we could spend 3 days doing nothing but this. I designed a counterterrorism response program for a number of law enforcement agencies in other states. We would spend about half the day doing nothing but studying this attack and learn, and just so they could understand what this looks like and what those capabilities should mean for a responder. And again, we don't want to respond as protectors. Obviously, we want to prevent it. So we'll talk about that in the last part of the webinar. All right, so overview. So November 26, 2008, this was an attack committed by 10 terrorists, or like a 10-man attack team that split up into different teams. The attack, this happened, and this took 60 hours to end, and we're going to get into why that happened. So 60 hours in like this continuous attack that took 3 days. The initial thought of this attack, we're going to get into this, was one target, it's believed, and then that grew throughout those 2 years of hostile surveillance. But what that final objective was to target Westerners and to target Jews there in Mumbai. They used a combination of stronghold assaults. So if you look at the assault, like the types of assaults, stronghold assaults, like going into a building and taking those buildings over. Vehicle assaults, or in this case, it was really carjackings, but they used weapons, IEDs. So really, it's very close to a vehicle assault. So actually, assaulting the vehicle and taking that vehicle over, and using that as a weapon and killing the occupants inside. Or stopping the occupants inside anyway. Barricaded hostage situations, so went into these locations, barricaded up and took hostages, and of course the use of IEDs or improvised explosive devices, and they were targets of opportunity. All right, so not only did they have 5 primary targets, but there were targets of opportunity that popped up throughout this attack that they took full advantage of to cause more casualties. And then, of course, you've probably seen this if you looked at any of the reports. Numbers kind of vary depending on what report and what organization is sticking it out, but 172 people killed, 300 injured. All right, show you a quick video here just to get an overview of an idea, because I flew through that, about the impact of this and what it looked like as they were wrapping this thing up.
As we told you earlier, the terrorist siege in Mumbai is over, but its consequences will likely be felt for a very long time to come. Mark Phillips has the story behind the headlines.
The fighting is over, finally. The Battle of Mumbai lasted 3 days. It may take a lot longer than that to piece together exactly how it was planned and carried out, and by whom. Throughout the multiple attacks and the response of government troops, the rumors flew like bullets, some of them tragically true, some not.
Whoa, yeah.
Battles flared up, literally. Were declared over, and then flared up again. As the smoke has cleared, though, some of the basics seem clear. This was terror that came from the sea. Rubber boats were apparently used to ferry the attackers ashore, possibly from this Indian fishing boat, which was reported hijacked. Once ashore, the attackers fanned out toward their planned targets, all closely grouped in Mumbai's commercial heart. First to the train station, where they fired indiscriminately at people on the crowded concourse. Then on to one of the city's landmark restaurants, where they also opened fire. The intent in both these attacks was simple, to cause carnage and confusion. The attackers knew exactly what they were doing, say security experts like Will Geddes.
Certainly the intelligence that I have been speaking to in India has indicated that they've had professional training. They may even be former soldiers themselves.
That training came into play again at the next major targets, Mumbai's 2 best-known hotels, the Oberoi and the Taj, and a center run by a New York-based Orthodox Jewish sect. Here, the intent seemed to be not just to kill, but to take hostages.
So anyone who had a British or American passport, they wanted to know. So I guess they were after foreigners, yeah?
The Indian response, while courageous, was also chaotic. It took repeated assaults to root out the attackers who seemed to know their way around the buildings. At the Jewish center, an American rabbi and his Israeli-born wife were among the hostages. Their 2-year-old son was somehow smuggled out. Commandos made their assault from a helicopter. They killed the attackers, but found the hostages dead. Indian officials say all this was managed by only 10 attackers, a number security experts like Will Geddes find difficult to accept.
I can't see how 9 simultaneous attacks across the city within the scope of 30 minutes could be achieved by a 10-person team.
As the funerals have begun, the hard questions are being asked, including the biggest question of all. Is this the first wave of a new kind of terrorism? Crispin Black is a security analyst.
This kind of raid fighting terrorist package. You want to be a suicide bomber, put a pack on your back and go and blow yourself up in an underground train, or do you want to go down in a blaze of glory? It's a sad and sinister thing to say, but I think we need to look out for this in the future.
The first view of the future may have been during 60 bloody hours this past week in Mumbai.
All right, so targets, primary targets, 5 primary targets once they got into Mumbai. So first was a train station or CST. So main transportation hub there in Mumbai. Hundreds or could be thousands of people in this location at one time when we start talking about what Mumbai is. So Mumbai is kind of like a Los Angeles and a New York for India. So it's kind of like it's a financial capital and it's an entertainment capital for India there. Second was a very popular restaurant or cafe, the Leopold Cafe, packed full of people at the time during an attack, and they knew that. The third target was a large hotel, or 2 large hotels that were normally full of Westerners, very specifically from Europe, that visit the hotel. So that was the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel and the Tower, and then the Oberoi Trident Hotel, again frequented by Westerners throughout the world. And then the Nariman House is or was a combination of like a Jewish community center and then like an apartment or housing complex for religious Jews there in Mumbai. There were some targets of opportunity. I'll go through that as we talk about the attack. Number one, there was a hospital. So as the attack starts taking place, and we're going to get into this, but as the first attack team goes to the train station or CST, which was about a 90-minute attack, as they leave that location, they actually go past this hospital where victims are being brought in, and they start attacking or shooting at that hospital. So it was a target of opportunity. There was a police vehicle or van which the same 2 adversaries end up hijacking, killing the police officers and taking that van, and eventually they're stopped in that van. So they conduct this stronghold assault at CST at the train station. They do kind of a standoff attack. They shoot at this hospital, and then they happen to see a van there that's got police markings. They try to take it. There are police officers inside of it. They kill the police officers, and they carjack or they conduct a vehicle assault and take the van. There were 2 taxi cabs in which part of the other teams, the assailants actually carjacked, killed the drivers or forced the drivers to continue to drive after they put IEDs in taxi cabs to make those VBADs or vehicle-borne IEDs to cause more damage. And then there was a gas station. I think the gas station was a target of opportunity en route to attacking the Leopold Cafe, if I'm not mistaken. So a gas station, they blew the gas station up. I don't remember if there were any casualties from that or not, but again, those are the 5 primary targets, or I'm sorry, you had 5 primary, and these were the targets of opportunity. All right. So background on the Adversary very quickly. So Lashkar-e-Taiba, our Army of the Pure, you guys have had our terrorist training before. So religio-political group, very specifically Islamic, based in Pakistan. And, you know, there was speculation around this before. Nobody wanted to say this years ago after the attack, but obviously ties with Pakistani intelligence services. And so there's some very specific reasons for that or behind it. We don't have time to get into that today because we want to get the surveillance part. So LATR Lashkar-e-Taiba was founded in 1990. its roots come from another Pakistani Islamic group, MDI, which was founded in 1989. So now we're talking about this religious wave, folks, going back to 1979, the invasion of Afghanistan by the Soviets. And so MDI was a group that was actually fighting alongside the Mujahideen to defeat the Soviets there in Afghanistan. MDI was founded by actually the founder of Al-Qaeda, which was not Osama bin Laden. It was a guy by the name of Abdullah Azzam, who was later killed because he had an idea about Al-Qaeda, and then bin Laden, and then someone else had a different idea as things started to escalate, and mysteriously Azzam is killed. His idea of Al-Qaeda, again, was something different. It was more like the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and so there was conflict, and so he's killed because of that. But in '89, he founds, Azzam does, MDI. And then when the Soviets finally pack up 10 years after the invasion, and when it started, when they leave Afghanistan, MDI starts to focus on Kashmir. So very specific history in Kashmir about dealing with India and Pakistan. You guys can look that up on your own. We don't have time to talk about it. But they start to focus very specifically on that region, and that ends up creating the need for LAT or Lashkar-e-Taiba, and that's kind of what it spawns into. Bad guys, adversaries, very quickly, 10 attackers. So let's get into who they were. This is important because I want you to understand these are folks that were modestly educated. So they grew up in very, very poor areas. They had a 3rd or 4th grade education. They had the families were broken up. I'll get into that. So they were trained for about 7 or 8 months by Lashkar before the attack. But again, these are folks that had not been fighting battles like in Afghanistan. Because of information they received from an adversary, they were able to conduct a 60-hour attack, stronghold assaults, vehicle assaults, hostage barricade situations for 60 hours based on information that a very well-trained surveillant had provided to them, or actually provided through LAT, and LAT gave it to them, Lashkar-e-Taiba, of course. So in their early 20s, they were recruited in the jihadist cause. Most of these guys grew up there in a very rough area of Pakistan, and so understand where they grew up, there's not a lot of work. So a couple of them, their fathers worked 150 miles away, so their dads weren't there. Their fathers were out trying to make a living and sending money back home, so the mom is raising them and their siblings. There's no running water. There's no electricity in the houses they live in. In these areas where they live, the center of everything is usually a mosque. The only thing that comes out, communication that comes out or comes in, is through that mosque. And so very quickly they learn about Islam because that's part of their culture, that's their religion. And so everything centers around that mosque. And the family structure is very poor because the dad's not there and mom's trying to raise them. And at the same time, understand these areas, there's not much happening. There's not a lot of money. There's not a lot of work. So very quickly, a lot of these kids turn to crime. They leave these areas, they go to bigger areas like Lahore in Pakistan, and through there, Lashkar-e-Taiba identifies these at-risk youth, and they start to actually recruit them. And at this time, these kids or these adversaries are growing up. They're hearing because Lashkar has been formed, I don't know, like 5 to 10 years right around, right after their birth, because they're in their early 20s at this time. And so they grow up in these areas poor, right? And they start to hear how great Lashkar is and all the good things that you can get from pledging allegiance and becoming a fighter for Lashkar. And so what happens with the majority of these attackers, they go into the big areas, very specifically right around the Lashkar headquarters. They are recruited. They go to like a basic, I think the course was 3 weeks, and that really makes them, turns them into or how to make them a good Muslim, very specifically an extremist. And so they're taught how to pray. They're taught a very strict sect of Islam that goes all the way back to the beginning of Islam, so all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad. And from there, they are shipped off to an advanced course where they are taught guerrilla tactics, use of weapons, how to build IEDs, how to conduct stronghold assaults. So if I remember correctly, there's about 7 to 8 months of total training wrapped up into all this before they conduct the attack. They are equipped with a number of, and they learned how to do this in the advanced course. They're equipped with a number of weapons, so AK-56 rifles, 7 extra magazines. They had all of them had 9mm pistols with 2 extra magazines for the pistols, 8 to 10 hand grenades, and then a number of improvised explosive devices that they used inside in some of the stronghold attacks, and also they used in the taxis to turn the taxis into V-beds, the taxis that they had actually carjacked. So tactics, here's how they did this. After this training, after getting this information, they travel about 500 nautical miles from Pakistan to Mumbai. As they get close to India, they hijack an Indian fishing trawler so they're not detected by the Indian Coast Guard. They kill the crew aboard with the exception of the captain right away. Once they get close to Mumbai, they then kill the captain, behead him, throw his body overboard. They come ashore in Mumbai. They get into 2 inflatable boats, and they break up into attack elements. So they get these 2 inflatable boats, and they come on shore. Once they come on shore in Mumbai, they're picked up. So it's about 9 o'clock at night, about 2100 hours. It's near the fishing area there. It's right there on the water in Mumbai. People start to question who they are. They're dressed in like, you can see the picture there, they're dressed in like, almost like 5'11" pants. They've got jackets on, they've got backpacks, and they've got bags with weapons. They're asked who they are by these fishermen in this little area, and they tell the fishermen to shut up, and of course the fishermen don't ask any questions, and then they go through the attack. So they broke up into 1 4-man assault team, and then 3 2-man assault teams to conduct these attacks. All of them knew exactly what targets they were going to, and as they went to these targets, of course, we talked about, they found targets of opportunity. Real quick, there's no sound with this. It doesn't matter. I mean, again, we've got an issue with the sound, but there is no sound with this video, or if there is, it's in Indian, so it doesn't matter. I want you to see something about these attackers. So they knew these locations. So they were given very specific target folders based on surveillance that somebody else had conducted. They knew exactly which way to turn inside these buildings. They knew exactly where to go. They knew the avenues of approach. They knew what the target areas inside the building should be, an idea of how many people were going to be in there. But here's what they didn't know. They'd never been on an elevator. This video, and some of it may be in here, where they get on an elevator and they're like jumping up and down because they don't know how the elevator works. Okay, so there are some things that are amazing about how when someone gives someone information, how successful they can be, especially if it's a plan like a surveillance. Well, at the same time, the bad guys have never been on an elevator, never been in here. So it's a very amazing, really, when we talk about the adversary and their abilities based on information received from someone else. All right, so just take a look at this video real quick. So what you have is CCTV. You've got attackers coming off elevators. There they are in a group. You've got security forces trying to respond from inside the hotel. They're not successful. Most of those folks are going to run away, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. They're trying to force their way into rooms. So what's happened? They're taking over these hotels. People are locking themselves in the room, and they're going up and getting people out of the rooms one by one. As you can see, they broke into rooms and they're taking hostages. They take these folks up on the roof, and those that are not Muslims are killed. Okay? And so just real quick on the attack. So the first attack after the train station, one of the 2-man attack teams takes the train station. They're in there for 90 minutes. Kill a number of people, leave that, see the hospital, start attacking the hospital, see the police van, overtake the police van, kill, I think, 6 police officers, and at some point they're stopped in that van. The only terrorist to survive is actually inside that van, and he is captured alive. Now as the other teams start to split up and take the hotels, take the Nariman House, and then take some of the other targets, they're conducting stronghold assaults. They're conducting standoff attacks, so they're shooting at buildings from a distance. Again, they're taking over taxis, putting IEDs in taxis. So all this is occurring with a number of these teams as they're splitting up throughout the city of Mumbai. And again, remember, they had never been to Mumbai before. This is the first time they'd ever been there. This is all based on information. So we talked about the success. You've seen how they're conducting these assaults, how they're able to get people out of rooms, take them up to the roofs. Those who are not Muslims were executed. Just real quick how we got, before we get into this, why did it take 60 hours? So as they are attacking, so the train station, first attack. So as they're attacking the train station, two of them, there were two security guards in the train station. So this is India security. They shared a pistol. The two guards are sharing a pistol. So you can imagine what the response is like from these two guys when you've got folks that have been training for 7 to 8 months to conduct these types of attacks. So they're very, very ineffective. So the security forces flee. They understand they cannot fight back against these two terrorists. As the police start to respond, they very quickly understand, because these are multiple attacks, distributed attacks throughout the city. They've never trained. The police haven't trained for this. So as the police start to show up, they're getting attacked. They very quickly understand that they are overwhelmed. There's not any way that they're going to be able to stop these attackers. The National Guard is called in. All right, so as the National Guard of the military comes in, they're armed with British Enfield 303 rifles. For any of you guys that know, or any of you folks on the webinar here that are watching us, look, British Enfield 303 rifles were great, like in 1950. But obviously in 2008 against terrorists that are carrying fully automatic rifles, hand grenades, and IEDs, it's not going to work. So again, they stand down. There's not much they can do. Another full-time military unit shows up. They quickly understand they can't deal with it, so they call for help from the NSG, the National Security Guards, which is like Indian Special Forces. They are actually 11 hours away. So they're at another location in India. There's a problem with them getting transport, so it takes them a while to get a plane to actually get on that transport to get to India, and so that's why it took 60 hours. So what you have is you have police forces, you have security forces, and you have the National Guard that understand that they are overwhelmed. Now, large number of security forces, large number of guard, large number of police officers, 10 attackers. The psychological impact, so we talk about what's required for a successful attack. 10 attackers for 60 hours held off an entire city of Mumbai. National Guard, police, security forces, because number one, of information they received from this guy that we're going to talk about. Number two, the element of surprise. Number three, they were in control with the weapons that they had. And number four, they were able to be mobile. They were running back and forth from targets. They were taking hostages. They literally kept them running for 60 hours until they were stopped. Now, once the NSG got there, once the National Security Guards were able to get transport, get on the ground, they immediately took up the attack, and they were able to kill the attackers. So this is where all the information came from. This is Daoud Gilani. Daoud Gilani, later David Coleman Headley, was born actually in D.C. His father's Pakistani, his mother American. They moved to Pakistan when he is young, I think when he's still an infant. Mom and dad get divorced. The mother comes from a family that has money, so she moves back to the U.S., very specifically in Philadelphia, where she opens up some sort of a pub, and it may still be there. I think it's called the Khyber Pass. So Daoud lives with his father. The father remarries. The father's connected, very well connected with the government people in Pakistan, because he's a broadcaster, like a national broadcaster. They do have some money. And so our adversary here, our hostile surveillant, is raised up in Pakistani military schools. At about the age of 14, 15 years old, he starts getting involved in drugs. Now, there's this very distinct split with, and from here on out, we'll just call him David Headley. You can see it, or if you see the photo, he has one green eye and one brown eye. So not only, he's half American, half Pakistani, but there's this very distinct feature to show that there's this split. There's this Western side, and then there's this side from Pakistan, which actually makes him very successful in what he's going to do and what we're going to talk about. So At about 16, or about 14, 15, he starts getting in trouble because he gets involved in drugs in Pakistan. He is at odds with his father and with his stepmother, so he contacts his mother, his biological mom, in the United States, and he moves back, or comes back to the U.S. at 16. She puts him inside this pub that's a very famous pub. It makes a lot of money. It's a very famous place in Philadelphia. I'm not sure if it's still there or not. So he's raised up being around people that come into this pub, and it actually helps her business because now here's this kid that's been raised up in Pakistan in military schools. He's half American, half Pakistani. It kind of helps with the environment or the culture that this pub has created. So it's a good thing for her that he is there. At somewhere around 18 or 19, he leaves the pub, leaves his mom, goes up to New York, opens up a business, and starts actually running drugs. He contacts a friend that he went to military school with in Pakistan, and unknowns to his friend, he actually uses his friend, because his friend's tied to the military, to get into places of Pakistan where people most of the time cannot without the military, and he's able to smuggle heroin back to the U.S. At some point, before he's 23 years old, he is caught in Pakistan. He gets out of that. And then in his 20s, he is arrested in the United States. And so, in fact, in 1998, he's caught smuggling heroin back here by the DEA, and he is arrested. He serves 4 years. Everybody that was involved in this outside of him served, I think, double the amount of time, and actually he gets out early. He is actually put on probation or parole. At that time, he convinces the DEA that he can help them. He wants to be a drug informant, so he becomes a paid drug informant for the United States Drug Enforcement Administration. As he's doing this, he's traveling back and forth to Pakistan. So he's giving them information about the drug groups in Pakistan and how that stuff's coming back to the U.S. At the same time, he's still dealing with drugs, and he starts to visit mosques in Pakistan and starts to connect back with his roots back to Pakistan and his Islamic upbringing. He continues to do this, and in 9/11, when we're attacked, he actually is in New York City. He's watching this on TV. He's seeing it. He has a girlfriend at the time. Because in the 90s and early 2000s, because he's kind of starting to get radicalized, he's going back to his roots, or going back to his Pakistani roots. He's hanging out in mosques in Pakistan, and he's going back when he's working for the DEA. He sees this. He's in front of his girlfriend, he makes a comment, the United States deserve this. She actually tells somebody turns him in the FBI. October 2001, he's questioned by the FBI and tells the FBI, hey, remember, I'm working for you guys. I'm an informant for the DEA. How could I be a terrorist? And so it's overlooked. They let him go. And at some point, I'm sure the DEA had to step in and verify or validate that. He continues to go back in the early 2000s, and then 2002 through 2005, he starts to get linked up with Lashkar-e-Taiba. They put him through the basic course, which teaches him how to be a good Muslim, and then he goes through advanced training. As he's going through advanced training, he decides he does want to fight. He wants to go to Kashmir, and he wants to fight against the Indians that are there. It's a struggle that's been going on for numerous years, and again, we don't have time to talk about that here. But Lashkar and someone else has other plans for him. And so Pakistani intelligence organization ISI takes interest in him because they're connected with LAT. And at that time, they start to train him in surveillance, how to conduct surveillance, how to pick soft targets, how to do those reports, how to develop target folders and send them back to LAT. They convince him to change his name because his Pakistani name creates too much suspicion, so he changes his name to David Headley. From 2006 to 2008, so he's gone through all this advanced training. He is now working for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. At the same time, after 9/11, he goes back to them and says, look, not only am I now finding information out about Pakistan with drugs, I can also get information about these terrorist organizations. So he convinces them now to put him into a counter-terrorist role, and the U.S. government does that. At the same time, he's getting training from LAT, he's getting training from ISI, and now they're going to start to groom him to conduct surveillance on Mumbai to conduct this attack. Now, in the beginning, And it depends on what report you read, depends on how you research, but 3 very specific points of research that I looked at. It's thought that LET in the beginning only wanted to attack the Taj. So the idea was these attackers would be brought in. Headley would be used to conduct surveillance on the Taj. They'd come attack the Taj, kill as many as people as they could in the Taj Hotel, and they would actually escape. The attackers would escape through the CST, through the train station. So in 2006 through 2008, for 20 months, Headley is sent to Mumbai, and he conducts detailed hostile surveillance for those 20 months. He's given them such good information. So here's what he does. He buys or he rents a very nice apartment about 4 miles from the Taj, and he immerses himself in the culture there in Mumbai. He makes friends with movie stars there in India. He creates relationships with women, has girlfriends. At the time, he's got 2 or 3 different wives in different locations. He is visiting the hotels, Taj, in the very beginning to start with. He's doing video. He's taking pictures. He's actually pacing. He's sketching. All this is done in 20 months out in the open. At one point, when he marries his 2nd or 3rd wife, I think it was his 3rd wife, and the other wives don't know anything about this, he actually takes that wife on a honeymoon to the Taj to again create this cover that he's there, enjoying the hotel. While this is happening, again, sketches, pacing. He's even now picking out that insertion point there by the water or by the bay where the terrorists are actually going to come in. So 20 months of all this good intelligence, LET then starts to ask him to gain or get information and surveillance on other targets, to include the Trident Oberoi Hotel, to include the Nariman House, and then to include the CST and the Leopold Cafe. This is all happening in 20 months, okay? This is out in the open. After the attack, when India finds out who this David Headley guy is, his picture goes up, there are numerous people inside of Mumbai and police and security officials that recognize him, that say that he was a friendly guy, that for 2 years as they got to know him, they hung out with him. They went to parties with him. They saw him videoing. They saw him drawing sketches. They didn't think anything about it because this is a friendly guy that used his cover and used that cover story very specifically to gain all of this information. Okay. His last, so if we talk about the attack cycle, we talk about what I call adversary attack methodology, target selection, then we get into gathering intelligence, and then we talk about surveillance. Here, unlike a church attack or folks from ministries, here we're talking about a terrorist attack, so this cycle might take about 2 years. There might be multiple points of surveillance, and there was here. Within that 20-month period, I think he went back and forth to Mumbai 5 times. His last reconnaissance or his last hostile surveillance was conducted in July of 2008. This is a photo as he's coming back into Mumbai on that date. When he's conducting that final surveillance in that AEM or that adversary attack methodology, again, he's looking. What can he see? So he's firming everything up. What can he see? Is it a soft target? Is it a hard target? Has anything changed? Has anybody observed me? What's the security look like here? And what are the system weaknesses? What are the vulnerabilities? How am I going to get these adversaries in? And so that target selection process and the surveillance process in those 20 months changed from 1 target to 5 targets, which again grew into 10 targets because of all the targets of opportunity. So now we start to talk about what does this look like. Again, when we talk about surveillance, that observation of a person, place, or thing for the purpose of gathering information about something. Hostile surveillance is that same definition, but for the purpose of conducting a successful attack. When we look at this, how do we do this? What does surveillance detection look like? So going back, what's the purpose of surveillance? So I want to gather information. I want to know what the system weaknesses are. I'm trying to get that target pattern analysis, and I want to know what security looks like. What are the site vulnerabilities? What does security mean? So when we start talking about, and of course that purpose is, or the requirements are, you need to see that target. I got to have cover. I got to have a reason to be there. I have to have a platform. And David's platform, or Headley's platform at the time, he was married. He was a business guy. He'd set up a business front in Mumbai. He did all this to be able to observe, to have a cover story, to have that surveillance platform. And then, of course, the last element is you have to have access. Easily he gained access because there were hotels, there were other locations that the public's welcome into, but here he was welcome in because he was just thought as another tourist, long-term tourist, a guest, and a friend of the people that actually manage these locations. So when we talk about a surveillance detection program, you must understand all those elements we just talked about, or I just discussed about what surveillance looks like, what those requirements are, and of course, what's the purpose of surveillance. So when we talk about detection here, what does that mean, surveillance detection? Very quickly, your strategies for surveillance detection, whether you're hotel, church, doesn't matter. Number one, I need to know what's expected. So what is the norm? What does that mean? When we talk about situational awareness, everybody thinks about the color code, Colonel Cooper's color code, and that is true. That is important. That's important to remember. The first time I actually saw that was in the late 1980s at my first gun sight class when I was in the Marine Corps. I remember that like that was yesterday, 30 plus years ago. But situational awareness is much more than being aware of our surroundings. It's understanding what it is that's supposed to be normal. So what it is I see every day, so I can separate what's not normal and what is normal. And number two, it also eliminates the element of surprise. David Headley conducted hostile surveillance in the open. We always talk about surveillance is that observation out in the open. That's exactly what this was. He conducted this surveillance in the open because the targets had no idea what normal and abnormal looked like. So he was able to create that element of surprise for the adversaries. Okay, so knowing what I'm supposed to look for, what's supposed to be normal. And this guy that came in here for 20 months, drawing sketches, taking continuous video, pacing, doing all these things over and over again that nobody was looking for because they didn't realize that that was abnormal. That's what obviously gave them that element of surprise when the adversaries came in. So number one, what is it you're supposed to be looking for? And separate what's normal and what is not. And of course, that comes with situational awareness. Number two is going to be, if I've got an adversary, so identify that adversary. You've heard me say there's no security without assessment. Assess what the adversary is, what does that adversary look like, and to be successful, what do they have to do? That goes back into that adversary attack methodology. What are those elements that I can detect in that methodology, number one? And number two, what does that look like? What does surveillance look like? Is it normal for a guy that's been coming in here for 20 months that continues to take video and photographs and sketches and use a GPS to walk around the city? Is that normal for 20 months for somebody that keeps coming back and forth? Gosh, at one point, does he not need a GPS? He doesn't know his way around? So what does adversary attack methodology look like, and what are those specific elements that are detectable, and what does that mean? Define that, study that, be on the lookout for that. And then, of course, you've got to have a process to determine. Threat is always based on intent, capability, and frequency. Here, when we talk about David Headley, you can't read the person's mind. But when we start to talk about intent, it's the actions, number one, because we can't read somebody's mind, obviously. But what are their actions, and is that normal? Number one. So what are those actions? And then if we go up and we start to talk, what is that person telling us? And is that what that person tells us and the way they're acting? Does that fit into the context of what they're telling me is happening and what's going on? Okay, so that breaks down that cover and that concealment of that surveillance platform. So what is happening there? So when intent, what are they doing? And then when we go up and talk to them, what are they saying to us? And what they're saying to us, does that match what they're doing? And does that make sense? Okay, so when we start to talk about means, of course, here we talk about means collection, or that ability to do that. What do they have with them? Okay, why does he always have a video camera? Why do they always have a cell phone? Why does he have a GPS device all the time? And then, of course, when we talk about frequency, this happened over a period of 20 months, 5 to 6 to 7 visits back and forth. So now, and of course, obviously we're armchair quarterbacking this, and I'm not meaning to do it. We're just talking about what surveillance detection should look like for you, for your church, for the person that you're protecting, so your principal. It doesn't matter. What does that look like? So when we start to talk about, again, what does that look like when we start talking about that intent, the word, and of course his actions, the means, what is he using? And then, of course, we talk about frequency. This happened over and over again. There's an old acronym in surveillance called TED. It's like a government acronym. And it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you really get into this, and that's time. Like, how many times have I seen someone? How many times have I seen that person in a different environment? Distances, have I seen them at different locations in this environment that we're in? And then, of course, demeanor. Like, what are they doing? How are they acting? And when I talk to them, what does that mean? Is that normal? Okay. So to be able to have that surveillance detection program, I need to understand what surveillance looks like. All right, guys, we're at 4:54. We started at 4:05 or 16:05. It's 16:54 now, so I promise to get you out of here in about 35 minutes. We're late. There's a whole lot. This could be 3 days of talking about surveillance detection in this attack. Hope you guys got something out of this quick presentation on, number one, what a successful attack looks like, and how giving information to somebody that's never been there, what that means and how successful somebody can be. Ministries, very specifically. If you want to know how to do this, Israeli security concept, or this is just behavioral threat detection. That's all this is. We just give it a fancy name because some of this I learned from the Israelis in 2011, and then I've learned this from other schools I've been to in the United States, and it is an Israeli concept. Some of it is. All right, so we've got that coming up August 23rd. Threat detection, very specifically, how to identify that AAM, what's supposed to be normal in your environment, and what it is you do about it. Very specific case studies, things to look for, and we give you a bunch of paperwork that you can stand on post with to look at to understand, is that what you're actually looking at or what you're seeing? Does that look like surveillance? Does that look like attack execution? What is it? All right, so if you want to know about that, August 23rd, Scott's going to send you the link. We've got CPS coming up also. I think Scott sent that out to everybody. All right. Thanks again. We appreciate it. Sorry, talking so fast, trying to get through that. We can talk about this for 3 days. So again, thank you, everybody. Protectors, be careful. Watch yourselves out there. The world is a crazy place today. Just, watch your backs. Use all the resources you have available. And remember, folks, protection is about prevention, not response.